Hello, everybody. We are going to talk today about a type of problem that you already know how to solve, but you might not be aware that you know how to solve it. And it's something that's going to come up when you're doing conversions. So before we get into what that problem is, I want you to think about this idea, because this is the idea that's going to transfer over. If there's a bus that goes from your house to your school, and there's a bus that goes from school to your friend's house, but there's no bus that goes from your house to your friend's house, could you still take the bus to your friend's house? So pause for a moment until you can convince yourself that that's possible. Then we can continue. The answer is yes, you can get to your friend's house. And the way that you do it is you just take the bus from home to school and then take another bus from school to your friend's house. Okay, so that's going to be the idea that we're following, but it's not going to be about taking the bus. It's about going from a fraction to a percent. The way that we learned how to do this is to rewrite the fraction so that the denominator was 100. Okay, once we have the denominator as 100, then we know the percent, because percent means out of 100, right? So if we get the fraction to be like 20 out of 100, then that is just 20%. Well, something that you might have thought of when we talked about that is, well, what if the denominator doesn't go into 100? What if there is no easy number I can multiply by to make it 100? And if you thought of that, congratulations, you are brilliant, and you're absolutely right. If we cannot get that denominator to be 100, we cannot just immediately turn the fraction into a percent. So the way that we have to do that is by using what we learned the last couple days. Okay. So remember that idea of the bus. If there's no direct bus going from your house to your friend's house, you got to take the bus to school and then take the bus from school to your friend's house. So what do I mean about school in this case? Well, we can't turn a fraction to percent necessarily, but we can turn a fraction into a decimal. Okay, we know how to do that. We can turn a fraction into a decimal just by dividing the top by the bottom. Okay, and once we have it as a decimal, do we know how to turn a decimal into a percent? We sure do. Okay, so we use this decimal as kind of our middle step to get from a fraction to a percent. Okay, so the steps for that, these are steps you should definitely have written down. So if you haven't written those down yet, please do so now. Step one is to divide the numerator by the denominator. And that is what we do to turn a fraction into a decimal. So step one is getting to the decimal. Divide the numerator by the denominator. Step two, we're going to multiply the result by 100. In other words, we're going to move the decimal over 2 spaces, because that's how we go from a decimal to a percent. Again, that's your answer. Okay. So these steps are steps we've already learned. We learned this to turn from a fraction to a decimal, and this to turn a decimal into a percent. We're just putting them together to go first to the decimal, then to the percent. So let's look at an example. So 5/8 is an example. There is no easy number you can multiply 8 by to get 100. If you're willing to go into decimals, you could find a number, but it's not a nice whole number. So we're going to go the other way. We're going to take 5/8 and we're going to turn it into a decimal. So I'm going to do my division. Remember, 8, the denominator, goes outside. 5 goes inside. So you're doing 5 divided by 8. So does 8 go into 5? No. I put a decimal point and a 0. Does 8 go into 50? It does. It goes in 6 times. So I'm going to put a 6 there. Again, the decimal is going to go straight up from where it was in this number. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract that, I get a 2. Okay. Well, I have nothing to bring down, so what do? Now I add a 0, bring that down. And now I'm asking, how many times does 8 go into 20? And it goes in 2 times. Okay, so I keep going with my process. 2 times 8 is 16. Run out of room here. Subtract that, I get 4. Okay, I'm going to add one more 0 to bring it down because I know that 8 goes into 40 exactly 5 times. Okay, so 8 times 5 would be 40. There'd be nothing left over, so I'm done. So 5/8 as a decimal is 0.625. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2, I'm going to take this decimal, turn it into a percent. And the way I do that is by taking the decimal point, moving it over 2 places. Here's step 2. So 0.625 equals 62.5%. And there's my answer. Okay, 62.5%. If you want to check to see if it's reasonable, you might think, well, I know 50% is half. So 62.5% is a little more than half. Well, 5/8 would also be a little more than half. So it seems to make sense. Okay, let's try this one. 1/3 as a percent. So again, I'm going to go to a decimal first and then to the percent. So I got to do 1 divided by 3. 3 does not go into 1, so I have to add a decimal and a 0. 3 does go into 10 3 times. Decimal stays there. 3 times 3 is 9. Subtract 10 minus 9, I get 1. Bring down another 0. Okay, so you might see I already did 3 into 10. It went 3 times. I'm back at 3 into 10, so it's going to be 3 again. And it's going to keep repeating those 3's. So 0.3 repeating is my decimal. Now, you want to be real careful when you write this as a percent because we used this line here to show that we have 3's going on forever. What a lot of people do is they'll say, oh, well, that's 30%. Well, it's not, okay? It might help to write this number out before we move it as a percent to make sure we remember what's happening. So 0.3 repeating means 0.3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and it keeps going. I'll do the dot, 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 say it keeps going. So that's what 0.3 repeating means, 3 over and over. So if we think about what actually happens when we move the decimal over 2 places, okay, so the decimal will move to right here. That puts 2 of the 3's in front of the decimal point, but it's still all 3's forever after because the 3's just keep going forever. So it's 33.3 repeating. Okay, we'd never put a repeating sign before a decimal because that doesn't make sense. Right? Decimals are the numbers that can go on forever, right? Not the whole number parts. Okay, so that's 33.3 repeating percent. Okay, let's do another one. Let's do 4/11. I'm going to bring it over here to have a little bit more room. So I'm going to do 11 divided by 4 divided by 11. 11 does not go into 4. Put 0.0. It goes into 40 3 times. 3 minus 11 is 33. Subtract, we get 7. Bring down a 0. 11 goes into 70 6 times. Okay. 6 times 11 is 66. When I subtract that, I get a 4. Which means I bring down another 0. Well, I know I've already done 11 into 40. 11 into 40 is where I started. 11 went into 40 3 times. Okay, and then that gave me a 6 next and got me back to 40. Okay, so this tells me that I'm going to have the same results over from this point, right? So it went into 43 times, then 6. So this 3, 6 is going to repeat. Okay, I'd have a 3 next, then a 6, then a 3, then a 6, then a 3, then a 6. So I get 0.36 repeating. So if I'm going to make this a percent, again, we want to make sure we think of what the decimal actually is 0.36363636. It keeps going. So if I make this a percent, I have to move the decimal exactly 2 places. Meaning I get 36 in front of the decimal, and then it's still 36 repeating over and over after. So 36.36 repeating percent. Okay. So the decimals are always going to either end or repeat. If they repeat, just be careful. Think about what that expanded decimal is when you move over your decimal point. Okay. Last one I want to look at is this one, 21 over 35. And I want to ask you to pause the video and think, is this an easy problem like we did last time? Or is this a harder problem? We have to do it in 2 steps. Do we have to turn this into a decimal and then a percent, or is there another way we can go here? All right, pause the video and convince yourself one way or the other. All right, so if you guessed that or figured out that this is one of the easy examples, you're right. I don't have to turn this into a decimal and then into a percent. But there is something I need to do. Okay? Right now, this denominator does not go into 100. However, this is not in simplest form. So if you have a fraction that's not in simplest form that you can reduce, you might be able to get it to the point where the denominator can go into 100. So if I look at 21 and 35 and try to find a common factor, the number that goes into both 21 and 35 is 7. Okay, and again, if you didn't see that right away, taking time to memorize your multiplication tables, multiplication facts will help you to see that, right? I recognize 21 and 35 from when I've been doing my sevens. Okay, so you want to get to the point that you recognize those too. So 21 divided by 7 is 3. 35 divided by 7 is 5. So this actually reduces to 3/5. Okay, and now if I look at my denominator, 5 is a number that goes into 100. Okay. So I can keep going with this process of rewriting. To get from 5 to 100, I have to multiply it by 20, which means I need to multiply the top by 20 as well. 3 times 20 is 60. So this number is equal to 60%. Now, could you have divided and make it a percent? Sure, but you didn't have to, right? So you might want to think, can I reduce the fraction first? And if you do, you might get one of the easier problems. Okay, that's all I got for you. Good luck.